Okay. All right, let's move on to archiving. Go back to applications management here in archiving. I'm going to make it very quick because it is not very complicated, and we've got some other a little bit more complicated things to go over here. So go into a particular profile and go to storage point archiving configuration. Again, archiving is part of your profile, and therefore sharing out your content. So when planning archiving rules, keep in mind that you have to choose different scopes within the profile to configure multiple archiving rules, but you can only have one archiving rule per scope. So that might make a little more sense when we actually look at what I mean by scope here. But each scope can only have one archiving rule because it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have multiple rules across the same scope, but you can just create the one rule for all of the different locations that the blog has to go to. So of course we're going to enable archiving. Allowing information management policies configuration is a great way to get your site collection admins to start to utilize archiving as well. They can go directly to a library and create their own rules, create their own archiving jobs, and kick those off. All right, let's go just through some of the rules here. I'll just click on a new rule because I already have one configured. And click a scope that you will like this archiving job to apply to. Let's go through an aging rule. No, because I already have a rule in there. That makes a lot of sense. So let's go ahead and just actually remove this rule so I can actually create a new one. All right, I'm going to go back to choosing a scope here. I'm going to go to my aging rule. And one thing to note about an aging rule, click on a new condition, is you will see two properties in here by default, and a third if you enabled last access date. Again, last access date is managed by storage point itself. It's not something that is exposed by SharePoint. So if a document has not been accessed in X amount of days, has not been modified in X amount of days, or is older after the creation date by X amount of days, so creation date plus maybe 365 days, then move it to a particular endpoint. Pretty straightforward. You can choose maybe a custom property, metadata property, to also be part of this rule, and maybe only include major and minor versions. But a really popular rule, obviously, for documents that are aging over time based on the creation date, the modified date, or the last access date. Let's tier those off to different scopes. Metadata rule, I think, again, we already saw this a bit on the filtering, but same type of rule. You can choose the particular metadata field that you are looking for, and if it's a managed metadata field, it's fully supported. If it's a choice column, it's fully supported, and you can choose which endpoint that goes to. You can select the custom content type as well based on maybe if a document is uploaded using this particular custom content type, let's just go ahead and archive it off. And then retain versions. Now, retain versions allows you to retain maybe only a certain number of versions in the database, and it's actually kind of a bit of a confusing interface, and it's not our fault. It's sort of, in order to get the functionality, it needed to be a little bit confusing. So in the text boxes here, you enter the version that should be externalized, where 1 is your most recent version. So if you enter, let's say 3 here, your most recent 2 versions will be in the content database. That means your highest number of versions, right, because those are your most recent. So if I'm on version 10 and 9 are kept in the content database, and the rest will be archived off, because theoretically, nobody else uses those older versions, so we don't need them on the same tier of storage. So I hope that makes sense. These are not version numbers. These are the latest version numbers to retain. Again, so let's take the example. If you enter 3, your 2 most recent versions will remain in the content database, and all others will be archived off. Now, keep in mind for 2013, shredding exists. And if a document is not actually updated but simply checked back in as a new version, the shred does not even change. So that means it may get externalized because the shred that we are getting sent is brand new. And the brand new shred is associated with those older shreds. So across versions, you share shreds. So that means you may be seeing basically everything almost get externalized because that shred is also used by an older version. So it might be a little bit more confusing or harder to use for those folks that are in 2013 because, again, shreds are shared. And shredding sort of gets rid of the need for even creating a versioning rule anyway. All right. So one thing to note here as well, let me actually just go ahead and create a quick rule and show you. When you create, let's say, an aging rule, I'll be very quick here. Just say, all right, created one day and select an endpoint active. Do modified. Press OK. Press OK. Okay, so I have a new rule here, but it's an aging rule. Aging rules are the only ones that are not event-driven. The other ones, the metadata and the versioning rule, those have event receivers that get registered. So when a metadata change or a new version is checked in, the event triggers right away. So when any blobs meet these criteria, immediately they are marked for migration and they are sent to the designated endpoint. The next time that content migrator job is run, the blob will be migrated to that endpoint. And that was from class 1. If you all don't remember, the content migrator job is what moves blobs from one location to another. So that could be from the system cache or its current location. Now the aging rule has its own job to queue that content. And when it meets the creation, the modified data or metadata or the access date criteria, that job will kick off and move to the particular endpoint. Let me show you what I mean. So if I change that, I press save here, this little pop-up is going to come up and say, do I want to run this on the content that currently exists in SharePoint? So basically processing your existing content. It's a really just good feature in case you created an archiving rule after your SharePoint environment has been pretty mature already.